Dr. Chapman, it is wonderful to have you back on the Happy Home podcast. And, we're talking about teenagers today. And one mother that you mentioned in your book, she sounds like the mom that I know. She says, "Why does my teenage son question everything I say? It's like something happened in his brain. It's like his whole personality has changed." And you know what? That mom isn't too crazy, is she?
That mom is really right, and she answered her own question. It is the brain. In those teenage years, the brain is changing, and they're beginning to think more logically. Notice I didn't say they're thinking logically. I said they're beginning to think
Yes.
logically. They're building that ability, and that's why they question things. We say typically, well, they're argumentative. They're
Yeah.
questioning things that I've taught them. Well, they're really trying to think through it for themselves, and that's healthy because we want them to not just take things because we said it. We want them to come to believe it themselves. And so we really need to play with that rather than say, "Now, that's not true. Now, don't go questioning things I've told you." That just shuts off the conversation. But if you say to them, "Well, no, that's an interesting thought. What made you think of that?" And they'll tell you, "Well, somebody said this or that, and that's an interesting thing. Uh, why don't both of us study a little bit more about that, and let's have another conversation about it, because I really would like to discuss that with you." So, you open the door to them
Yeah.
questioning you and see it as a positive thing rather than a negative thing. So, yeah.
And when they, let's say you in your knower, like, I'm right. My teenager is
Yeah.
wrong about this. How can we, while having that conversation, still have that strength to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we have a commitment and we go to church on Sundays, even if you
Yeah.
think this X, Y, and Z, we still as a family are going to go." How do you kind of walk that line?
Well, I think there are things in which the parent, remember, parents are the authority, not the teenager. And I think there is a place to say, I remember when my son said to me, he said, "Dad, I don't want to go to Sunday school anymore." You know, I said, "Well, that's interesting. Why would you say that?" He said, "Because it's boring." And I said, "Well, I've been in some boring classes myself." I said, "But in our family, we do go to Sunday school. So you can decide if you want to just be bored or if you'd like to maybe start asking some questions and make it less boring, you know." And so I think there is a place for us to say, we are going to do this. But on the other hand, I think it's very important for us to listen to their reasoning and
Yeah.
why they're saying what they're saying, and validate I can see how you might feel that way. Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. I can see how you'd feel that way
Yeah, you
because
can say, "I
I've been
remember
in
being a
boring classes.
teenager. I
Yeah.
pretended I was sick too to not go places."
Absolutely. So I think that's the approach that we take. And I mean, if it's something that we're going to do as a family, ultimately the parents saying, "Remember, I'm the parent and you're
Yeah.
the teenager,
Yeah.
and parents have the final decision. I want to hear what you have to say because I really do. I appreciate it. And I value what you have to say, and I value your thoughts, and I want to hear you. But ultimately, when it comes to this decision, I have to make the decision I believe is best for you."
So now, I have teenagers now, and my oldest is a senior in high school. And when he was a boy, Ethan, he talked all the time. I mean, when, if he's 4, 5, 6, 7, "Mom, mom, mom." I mean, he's just talking all the time. But then, of course, he became a teenager and he didn't mom, mom, mom anymore. So how do we maybe particularly talk to us moms when our teenagers become less talkative
Yeah.
than they
I,
were when they were kids?
I think we have to recognize that as a move toward independence,
Mhm.
which is healthy because we want them to be independent. By the time they get to be 18, they're going to leave and go off to college or going to university. I mean, going to the military or get a
Yeah.
job. So we want to move them toward independence, and that's just a part of it. That they're pulling back a little bit, being a little more independent. It may surface in other things. They may say, "I don't want to sleep with in my brother's room anymore. I want to put my bed in the basement." You know, they're just kind of pulling away, wanting to be more independent. And I think we play with that. But with more independence, we also want to remind them of responsibility. For example, if you put their bed in the basement, they say, "Now, if we're going to do this, then you're going to have to be responsible for dusting your furniture and mopping the floor, sweeping the floor, whatever it is you think is appropriate," because that goes with being more independent. But I think that accounts for the fact that sometimes they're not nearly as talkative as they were before. They're keeping more of their thoughts to themselves. And I think parents just recognize that's not that they're rejecting you, it's that they're moving both emotionally, physically, kind of moving a little bit away from you. They don't want to be the child now, they're a teenager. And so they keep their thoughts to themselves. That's why it's important for us to ask them questions, even if they're not giving long answers. Ask them questions and keep open for them to ask us questions when they wish. When they wish.
Yes. I think about that responsibility. There's one line in your book that really stood out to me. One of the tragedies of our day is that many teenagers are growing up in a home where they have no responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I will be the first to confess, I'm an only child who I was spoiled. I didn't have to do that many chores. I didn't have to vacuum. I think maybe I did my own laundry. That might have been the only thing. But of course, my husband James, he was the youngest of four, and he's used to all these chores. So when I give my children a chore, sometimes I try to make it easier. Like I'll say, "Oh, you do the silverware, and I'll do the rest." Whereas James will be more like, "Will you please clean the kitchen?" So talk to us. So I understand this. Talk to us about why this is so important that they actually have responsibilities around the house.
Well, again, we want to help them move toward independence. For example, if they never learn how to wash clothes, the university does not teach you that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether the military does or not, but I know the university does not. And so there's a whole lot of things that don't teach at the university. They have to learn at home. So they need to learn how to wash dishes, how to clean toilets, how to vacuum floors, how to mop floors, and on and on and on. In fact, I suggest that parents make a list of all the things they would like for their teenagers to know how to do by the time they get to be 18. And let the teenager help you make the list. They'll
Yeah,
probably have some things that you weren't thinking about. They may want you to teach them how to change a tire on the car if they happen to get a flat tire.
that's right.
That's a wonderful skill for them to know. So let them help you make the list. And then age appropriately, you start teaching them how to do those things. And you make it a positive thing for them. I want you to learn how to do things, and I'm sure there are things you'd like to learn how to do. So let's make a list and let's work on these things because I want you to succeed as an adult. And so, and the old thing of focusing on I get to wash dishes
Right.
rather than I've got to wash dishes.
Like try eating your dinner without dishes tomorrow and you'll realize
Yeah.
it's a blessing to have the
Yeah.
dish.
Right. So teaching them responsibility and that's a good thing. It's a positive thing that my parents trust me enough to let me wash the car or vacuum the car. It's that I get to do this. And they realize they are learning skills.
Yeah.
And we need to emphasize that. It's not just that I want you to do something to help me, though that's fine too. But I want you to learn how to do this so that when you get married, you'll know how to wash dishes. You'll know how to do all these things.
How do you motivate that child who's just like, I really don't care? Like, I look at the list and I'm really not moving from the couch and I really don't care. And to move that from, I as your mom or I as your dad want you to do these things to transferring it to the student, the child,
Yeah.
teenager saying, I better learn how to do this. How can we help them make that shift?
I think a couple of things. One is to just bring up the concept that if they don't learn how to do these things, they're not going to be very attractive to somebody else to get married. Who wants to marry a guy that can't do anything or a gal that can't do anything?
Yeah.
And the other thing I think is to help them understand that there are some things that we do that we enjoy doing, other things we don't enjoy, but we do them because they're a task for us.
Yeah.
And with increasing independence, there is responsibility. So, for example, if they get to the age where they're driving the car, then with that freedom, it gives them a lot of independence if they get in a car by themselves and drive off. With that, you say, well, now here's the responsibility with that. Every Saturday before noon, you have to vacuum the car, or maybe wash the car, or run it through a car wash, whatever.
Right.
But some responsibility, and also you have to obey the laws. And so, if you happen to be speeding and you get stopped, then not only will you have to pay for whatever it costs, but you will lose privileges for a week. And if you don't vacuum the car, if that's one of the assignments, you'll lose the privilege for 2 weeks. And so they get the picture that
Yeah.
with independence, there's responsibility. And so they're motivated because they want to keep their independence. So that's one positive way to do it.
And that's very real,
Yeah,
that's how that works. You're independent, but you have responsibilities.
yeah,
I also think of that for us. We have grown up with our kids, very close. Like when they did martial arts, my husband and I, we were in the class with them. And when we had an after school Bible club, they helped us. So we've done a lot of things together.
yeah,
So lately about youth group, I had asked the girls, because you think sometimes, oh, I want to volunteer because I want to be helpful, but then I want my kids to have a place where mom and dad aren't,
yeah,
So I did
yeah.
ask my kids, what do you think if I thought, and then Noelle was so sweet. She's a sophomore. She said, well, you can do whatever you want, mom, but I'd really prefer that you did it so that I had a place that you weren't, and I think that's good. So on purpose to say, let me back away so you can feel like you're completely on your own. You're making your own adult friends, with the youth leaders, and I'm not there. I'm not part of that. And I think
Yeah.
that's really healthy. Talk to us parents who we kind of like to insert ourselves into our children's lives.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's really valuable to seek to be in a church where there are activities for young people
Mhm.
and where there are other adults that are leading them because they need to hear the things about Scripture and about Christ from other adults and
Yeah.
not just you. Now, certainly, we're going to be doing it in our home. We're going
Right.
to be reading the Scriptures and discussing it and talking about it and letting them ask questions. But the church can complement that. And that is a place where we know they're going to be relatively safe because the leaders are going to be Christian people. And so we can encourage them to be a part of that. And if they really get into the group, yeah, it helps them because they feel more independent. My mom's not here. My dad's not here.
Right.
And we went on a weekend retreat without them.
That's right.
So
That's
all of that
right.
is very, very positive because we
Yeah.
want them to have that spirit of independence. We want to help
Mhm.
them move toward being independent.